welcome to the Motivational Millennial podcast. This is the season 2 finale of the episode, and you know what that means.
What does it mean, Ivy?
It means we're going to share a little bit about how we feel like we've grown over the last year.
Oh, good.
So, yeah, we could just hang out and talk about ourselves in this episode.
With an eye towards how we can help other people through that process.
Well, I think that goes without saying. Isn't that sort of the mission?
Yes, the mission and the motivation. We're not just pure narcissists here on the Motivational Millennial podcast.
I mean, I know that I just like to re-listen to my own voice over and over again.
Well, that makes think, one of us.
Wow.
I like to not listen to
it's actually the worst.
Yes.
It's actually the worst to do that.
Yes. Oh,
okay, so what do you want to say about yourself first? No, I'm just kidding. We can start kind of general, but what do you think is one of the big ways that you have changed or grown over this season?
I think the biggest way that I've grown and the biggest life realization is something that will be familiar to any Stephen Covey reader of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's this idea of win-win. And it sounds so simple. It's like, okay, so you try to create situations in your life that are win-win. And I think the thing I recognized and why this struck me so much in so many different ways is when I really started to look at it, I found that my entire life I've structured around I have to lose for other people to win. Like I have to sacrifice myself or sacrifice my happiness or sacrifice my finances. Like I have to sacrifice to make other people happy. And so it's this really unhealthy model that I think we see a lot actually in society of the way to receive love or receive praise or receive money is to sacrifice yourself. And if you're in a situation or a relationship of any kind where it's like, I sacrifice my happiness so you'll be happy, and you sacrifice your happiness so I'll be happy, then you just have 2 people sacrificing themselves and nobody's happy. And that's not a great recipe for a sustainable, happy, healthy, productive relationship of any type. I see this, it pops up in business and the whole idea of like, well, there's this opportunity, but I really need to sacrifice my own stability and only ask for like the minimum I could possibly take. Versus like, how can I create so much value and excitement and awesomeness that this person is excited to share whatever monetary value is a great fit? And just things like that. I think it applies to so many different areas of life, or even just in friendships. Like, to make this person happy, I need to sacrifice making my needs known or asking for what I want or saying, I'd like to do this. And so the whole idea of win-win is we can have a conversation and both win versus everyone just trying to sacrifice to make each other happy.
Well, it's so interesting. This is reminding me of one of the lessons. And for our audience, we're developing a video curriculum on the growth mindset and grit for K through 12 schools with Blake's brand. I'm super excited. But one of the lessons is you always have a choice.
Yes.
And that's what this is kind of reminding me of, and that we often feel like we are trapped in whatever situation, like we have to do this, we have to go to this family gathering, we have to do whatever it is. We forget that we actually have a choice in any situation. And, it's so interesting because that can be simultaneously empowering and a little bit scary to just realize that, we haven't had to. I know the first thing that comes to my mind is family gatherings, honestly, and like putting myself in a situation where I feel really uncomfortable because I feel obligated to be there.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that that's a choice that you're making in that moment. No one is really forcing you to be there. You are choosing to sacrifice your own happiness in that moment, but it doesn't feel good to like have that realization kind of. And so it takes a lot of like strength and bravery, for you in this moment to be showing up and talking about win-win, because you're kind of having to think about ways in which, you elected to sacrifice yourself when maybe that didn't have to happen. And so that takes like a lot of strength to recognize that.
You're absolutely right. It requires taking ownership over having a choice. And not feeling like, oh, well, I have to do this, so I have to be unhappy. It's like I am choosing to sacrifice my happiness or advocating for myself in this situation because I think that's the only way I can make other people happy. And
Right.
so choice is huge because there is no only way to do anything. Certainly not to make people happy, which is another fallacy, right? We can't make people happy. We could sacrifice ourselves all day long and someone could still be unhappy for reasons completely unrelated to us or because they just don't want to be happy. And so it's a losing uphill battle, and it doesn't leave us resourced enough to actually make the difference we want to see in the world. So I appreciate you pointing out the choice piece because I think at the core of everything is choice.
So, how do you feel like, since you kind of had that revelation and started living that way intentionally, how has that affected your experience of life?
It put me in the driver's seat of my life to say, I have a choice in how I want to make money. I have a choice in how I want to travel, how much I want to travel, who I want to spend time with, what I want to do. And it's made such a difference because I've stopped giving away my power in situations where no one even asked for it. You know what I mean? It's that idea of like, well, I have to go do this. It's like, no, you don't have to do. What are you talking about? Like, no one's asking you to do anything. So
Just take my money.
Exactly.
Take it all. Take my money.
Exactly. It's like, what? Why? What's happening?
I didn't ask for it. What's happening?
I know. And it's this realization that I've constructed my life in the sense of obligation to some imaginary version of an authority figure or another force out there that is like the right and responsible and self-sacrificial and puritanical work ethic and Southern gentleman version of myself. And it's like, I don't have to be that. Like, if my mom, who I love so much, my mom is not asking me to be any of those things. You know, she just wants me to be happy. So it's a great reminder that often growing up, there's this image of the world that we think to be a quote unquote good person or happy person or whatever, we have to mold ourselves into that image of what is expected of us. And I've really just been trying to be conscious and admit how much I allowed this to happen to myself. And I think that's where the ownership piece comes in. It's like, yes, there were times that were stressful. Yes, there were situations and relationships that have been demanding, but it's like, I still always had a choice in those situations. And so it's hard to admit that sometimes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I think is one of the bravest things that we can do when we're growing, when we're doing personal development stuff and hearing like positive thinking and whatever. Part of that is just recognizing that we really are empowered to affect our lives. And I don't know, I think it's so interesting what you were talking about. We sort of create this version of what success looks like or what perfection looks like or whatever in our mind's eye. And it's not actually in any way real from
Yes.
from society or anything. It's just a way for our negative ego or for our gremlins or whatever to keep us small and therefore keep us safe.
Yes.
Because subconsciously it's like, we have created a version of us that can never actually exist because it's just perpetually growing and changing and becoming more and more perfect and unattainable because we have imposter syndrome and we don't want to think about how we are already enough and all of those things, So it's just so interesting how we can, create this for ourselves. And I think actually, if you don't mind, like this is actually a pretty good segue into one of the things that I wanted to talk about in my growth. Do you feel complete with your share?
Yeah, it's so funny.
There.
We're on the same wavelength. I was actually literally about to ask you how, your own growth and self-image has developed over the past year.
Well, I think it's really interesting that we have some of those similar themes of taking ownership of our lives and, the decisions that we're in or the circumstances that we're in and really moving away from that victimhood mentality. I mean, I think for me, that journey really started in September of 2017 when I was just really taking a look at my life of like, I'm not really treating myself very well. I'm extremely anxious and unhappy. I'm isolated. It wasn't intentional. It was just like over time, I was like, wow, what is happening? I wasn't being conscious. I'm grateful for a lot of reasons when I was living in the Bay Area and all of those things that I learned and grew. But at some point, I just became aware of these things that I was accepting and tolerating in my life. And so I made the decision to move, and I moved back to my hometown, Wichita, Kansas, in January. I rented a house. Like, I'm living in a house for the first time in my life. And it's like all of this space to myself, which is very different. And through that whole process in the fall, I had to take ownership of the fact that I was feeling this way. I had to take ownership of the decisions that I made and the ways that I was accepting life. And I also had to take ownership of the decision to move and therefore displace my 3 roommates.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't make excuses. They were frustrated with me and upset with me, which is fair enough. But I didn't come to them and say, oh, but, this was happening and I couldn't help it. I have no other decision, to make. And this is just what I have to do. Like, no, I was just like, I understand that you're frustrated, but, and, but's not a great, but I understand that you're frustrated, and I know that this is the right decision for me. And this is the right decision that needs to be made. Like, was that uncomfortable? Sure. Because in that moment, I could have just tried to minimize everything, mitigate everything so that people wouldn't be so mad at me. Yeah. So that was sort of my first gauntlet of living with 3 people who were upset with me, which I'm trying to make people like me. And it was through that process of realizing just kind of what you're talking about, which is that, I'm actually struggling so much less. I'm so much happier. I'm so much more aligned with myself now that I'm not constantly worried about upsetting other people or the way that they're viewing me. I'm much more honest. I speak my mind more frequently, and I'm really trusting myself more and honoring myself more. And I just, in that moment, I was like, man, all those wasted years of not taking care of myself or, making decisions that I thought other people wanted of me because I wanted them to like me, when actually people being mad at me or people not liking me in this moment is not that big of a deal. It's not great, but I'm not dying. It's not the end of the world. It's okay that I'm not loved and admired by everyone in the land, what I mean? And that's really okay,
How has your life changed since embracing that freedom? Because I'm really hearing freedom for you when you're saying that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because the gauntlet definitely wasn't over. I mean, I got here in January. It's now into May, and I found a therapist, and she has been really incredible, very challenging, very compassionate. And those are things that I really look for in a therapist for myself. And that's important to get the right match. But one of the things that she brought to my attention, which I've known that I've had generalized anxiety disorder for a long time, but she was looking at encouraging me to explore borderline personality disorder. She was like, do you know what borderline personality disorder is? And my brain's like, I mean, only the most terrible things that they depict in media. That doesn't sound great. And she was just like, hey, let's just take a look at some of the characteristics of it, and we can just decide together. She's like, I'm not trying to put a big diagnosis or a label on you, but it's just about, can we learn a little bit more about what's going on? Oh my gosh. I just remember that moment she was reading these characteristics, which I'm not going to really go into depth in this moment, but I was asking her, and I was like, I mean, isn't that just how everyone functions? She was like, no, not necessarily. And when I started reading the literature that she gave me and started doing some of the workbook things, the common thread around that is self-sabotage and there's a lot of reasons and ways that your brain developed as a kid and all of these other things I'm not going to go into as to how this happens. But, there's a lot about fear of abandonment, not trusting that people care about you when they do care about you. So you tend to push people away, making crazy impulsive decisions and, stuff like that. So it's to me, it feels like a lot of self-sabotage. So that was really challenging in that moment to be like, okay, what does this mean about me? Which ultimately I feel really grateful for understanding some of these patterns and how they all fit together. So it's helped me learn how to get better treatment for myself, therapeutic treatment. And also, like, I've just had to have several sort of, I feel like, come to Jesus sessions with my therapist where it's just like what you said, really having to look at and admit the ways in which I have created my own misery and my own struggle and my own pain by acting from and believing stories that are completely false around my self-worth and around my relationships and all of that. And like the biggest thing that I remember her saying just a few months ago that like was really struck me was she was just like, I was talking about how I'm afraid of disappointing people and I'm afraid, and she just said, Ivy, you have to take responsibility for the way that you're viewing yourself. That is only you. It's only you. You have to take responsibility for that. And that was another come to Jesus moment. I've had so many with her. I love her, but so it's all around that theme, I think, overall of, and I've had, moments of really crying, thinking about, gosh, how many relationships have I sabotaged, or ways that I've kept myself from being successful and happy, even just on a daily basis, because I'm determined to believe these bullshit, I'm just going to say it, bullshit stories that are going on in my head that we all have, to some degree. And so things just have been really different, actually, over the last few weeks and months. Like I've experienced the longest periods of non-anxiety in my life because I was able to just kind of admit my own responsibility and therefore feel more responsibility and empowerment in the moment.
Well, thank you for sharing so much with so much vulnerability and so much honesty and clarity in that. I think that's something that's so hard to do in general with ourselves, let alone to talk about it with other people. So I really want to honor your share and celebrate too what you said. And isn't that the most wonderful irony, right? The thing we're afraid of the most, like taking that ownership, like fully acknowledging our own role, like that ends up being the most freeing.
Yeah. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, totally. I love what you said earlier about the story, like, seeing the behavior patterns and then recognizing the stories that aren't true or that are constructed. And I think the thing was, for me, I've often got this fear of like, well, if I choose a positive story or like an empowering story, I'm not being realistic. There's this kind of vibe about like, oh, Blake, well, that's fine for you because you are like trying to do something you really care about in life or whatever. But what about for everyone else? Like, and they just realize like there is no everyone else. We're all like, we're all story making machines, and we just have become habituated to whatever story tends to keep us safe or feel like it keeps us safe, right? Or makes us feel comfortable, or even if we're miserable, but like there's still a comfort in the misery. Like there's so many of these stories that we just grab onto and say, no, but this is real. And I think the most freeing thing and challenging thing for me has been, what if it's not? And I think that's the place to start. It's like, you don't have to go and say everything you've ever believed is wrong. It's just asking a question. What if this isn't completely the way it actually is? Or what if this isn't partially the way this is? Or what if this isn't actually the way it is? And just allowing that space to explore. And it's scary because like, well, I have to release certainty. It's like, but certainty is often the problem. It's like deciding that the world has to be this way, and that it often has to be really unpleasant, and therefore it is unpleasant because that's the story that we graft on top of whatever the experience is. And so I've just really been practicing with just being present, like releasing story. And like one specific example is I've recently have had this crazy thing with my ears where I haven't been able to hear anything, and it's been really distressing. And so on plane rides, I've had to do some things where I can't wear earphones anymore on the ascent and the descent. And for me, like going into my headphones is my little cocoon of sanity because I travel so much for the motivational speaking stuff. And so I was like, oh, you mean there's going to be an hour on the front end and an hour on the back end where I can't have my headphones? Like I have to just experience what's around me. And so
I wish people could see what's going on with your hand. Like he's like holding his like forehead and like, oh my God, you mean?
yeah, so like,
see that. When you describe it, you mean I have to experience people? I mean, I understand that. I feel that way on planes too.
yeah, and like there's screaming, and again, I have such empathy for the screaming children because it's so painful and the peer pressure. But so, so I'm sitting, I'm just like, oh man, and so I was like, okay, I get to have a choice about how I experience this like hour up, hour down, like. Am I going to choose to say, oh, this is so terrible and go looking for every single noise or unpleasant experience that is coming into my perception? Because like, oh, see, this is so bad because I can't wear earphones. Like I'm a victim, right? Like I can't wear earphones. So I have to experience all these people. Why is this person loud? And why is this person talking? Why is this person screaming? Like, and I just said, what if my story is this is an opportunity for me to really notice and feel compassion for like everyone's experience around me. Like the person who is sick. Wow, that must be really terrible to travel while you're sick. The person who's like talking loudly to his girlfriend and is being really obnoxious. Like, wow, this person doesn't feel safe enough to have like an honest conversation like right now. So he's projecting all this stuff. Like, that must really be terrible to not feel like safe enough to just be real with somebody. And so it's totally changed my experience. And I thought it would be exhausting because I thought it would just...
You're talking about that. I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds like that could be empathy overload. But
yeah, but here's the beautiful part. I don't have to change it. I don't take responsibility for the sick person or the guy who's having a really dysfunctional conversation or the stewardess who's unhappy. Like I don't have to take responsibility for other people's happiness, but I can still have a lot of compassion for what they're going through.
Yeah, what's that like for you? Because, we've known each other for a really long time, and I know that wasn't always the case. Like you kind of felt a sense of responsibility for just strangers in any room in a restaurant, on the BART train or whatever. What's that like for you to kind of experience a shift in that way?
Well, that's part of the reason I hide. You're right with the headphones is because it's like it gives me a way to not have to care or feel like I have to care. Because if I'm not aware of it, I don't have to care about it. If you're not aware, you don't have to care. Well, that's a really demotivational poster.
Out of mind.
That's right.
out of earshot, out of mind.
That's right. Out of ear, nothing to fear. So I think it's a practice, which is a good reminder. Like it's not about doing it perfectly. It's not about doing it every time, all the time. It's not about not getting upset or disturbed or annoyed, but it's practicing it because the more I practice it, the more I'm able to do it voluntarily. And when I can do it voluntarily, that's incredibly empowering. And so recognizing that I always am acting voluntarily because I always have a choice, which is really hard to continue to remind myself.
To be super conscious all the time, that can be exhausting.
Yeah, but it's so worth it. Like I feel like a different person in the best way possible. So
yeah, I really relate to that because my therapist has been saying for a while, like, it's going to get easier. I mean, and I've been working on anxiety and, and personal development and all that stuff like for a long, long time. And I've grown a lot and it's gotten so much better over the years. And I've just learned a lot of techniques and all of that. But there's been this huge shift in not having to work so hard to feel peaceful and to feel joyful. I think, one thing with BPD, sometimes GAD, is that, life feels like a struggle constantly. Like even when you are doing something that you theoretically want to be doing, you're like, oh, I made plans to go with my friends to the park on Saturday. And then Saturday comes and it's like, oh God, now I have to get up and I have to go to the park with my friend, and you're like sucking the fun out of life for a long time. And I've recognized that pattern for years, but I couldn't, it's just taken time. It's just taken self-love, self-compassion, self-worth, all of that stuff, practice to get to this place. But she was saying it'll get easier, and you know what? She's fucking right. Like I didn't believe her. You know what I mean? Like, cause I'm like, I have been trying out for this for 10 years, woman, But she was right. And I think, a big shift for me the last few months has just been trusting myself, like trusting myself, trusting that I'm not going to disappoint myself, or that if I do, then it's okay and I'm not going to beat myself up, like developing a healthier relationship with myself. And so when I say that I've experienced the longest periods of non-anxiety, it's like, I haven't been waking up. There's periods of times where I wake up just like terrified for no reason. And it's just anxiety crap. Like I just wake up terrified for no reason of life. And that's just how I start my day. But, it's been weeks since that's really happened. And I just am waking up normally. And then if I'm feeling frustrated, or I feel like I'm like upset with someone, or I need to have a conversation and I know I'm not going to be able to talk to them for 3 days. And then I think, in the past, I would have just tortured myself by being frustrated and having the conversation for 3 days until the conversation happened, rather than being like, okay, am I just going to let this go and enjoy what's happening in this moment and enjoy the 3 days and trust myself to execute that conversation well 3 days from now? Or am I going to torture myself for 3 days thinking about all the things that could happen and what could they say? And I'm going to say this, and you're like totally sucking the fun out of life. I have to be conscious about it. So to your point, it's like I have to be conscious. I have to make a decision to let it go, but letting it go has gotten easier, rather than being like, God, I need to let this go. Why can't I let it go? Oh gosh, now I'm sticking to it even more. That's what, had been. And so now I can really see, like, my anxiety got triggered like a week ago, and just the difference of how my existence was that day, like how much less energy I had, like just, feeling really worried and scared about life and about my future. And it's amazing how anxiety, like you can start with one very specific thing. Like you just wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to remember to send my rent check. And then it's like, and what about my dog's health? And what about this vacation I have? Like, and it's just like everything comes, and you're like, no. So it's just in that moment of like, okay, I need to mail that rent check. And I'm like, cool, I'm going to do that. Let's just let that go. I'm going to think about things I'm grateful for right now until I fall back asleep. And it tends to
work, that's such a ringing endorsement to what you were saying about it took 10 years of work and self-development and struggle to get to where you are today. And I think so often personal development is considered narcissistic. But I just think what you said is such a beautiful testament to the power and the long-term impact that personal development actually has on your life and on all the people that you are around for the whole rest of your life. It's like, if it was a 10-year investment to become this amazing, empowered person who is like making a difference and who's overcome her challenges or is overcoming, or whatever the phrasing.
We're never really done.
I was about to say, yes. Let's not sort of plant a flag in it, but have made real progress on so many areas of her life. Like, just thinking about how much happier you're going to be for the whole rest of your life, like all the people you're going to impact for the whole rest of your life. So if it takes 10 years of investing up front to make that happen, like that's a bargain. You know what I mean? Like that's a great deal. Like I wish, most things only took 10 years of investing to pay off like massive dividends down the road. So I think it's such a great reminder that while I feel like, oh, I'm spending so much time focused on myself and my problems and the ways I'm dysfunctional or whatever. It's like, no, that's time well spent, because you have the entire rest of your life to have the benefit. And not just for you, but for everyone in your life. Like everyone in your life is going to be so much happier interacting with you and experiencing you as this person who loves yourself, who feels empowered, who takes ownership over your choices. And yeah, so thank you for sharing that. It's just like a big ringing endorsement, I think, of what you and I really care about, the reason we started Motivational Millennial in the first place.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think to me, personal development isn't just about, isn't just about living a fulfilling life. Like I'm minimizing living a fulfilling life.
Right. Trying to live a fulfilling life, that doesn't really matter. Like whatever, that's a side benefit. Yeah.
Well, I think sometimes you think about personal development, part of the stigma or something is like just about like confidence and success. Mm-hmm. And that's part of it. And that's a really important part of it. Like I believe that success is healthy. I believe being financially stable is healthy. I believe money is a good thing, But To me, it's so much about mental health. Like mental health is so, because of my specific history and how important I think it is. And because I think people don't talk about it and it's not bad for you to think about how your experience of life is affecting your own happiness or your struggle or thriving, the opposite of that. I mean, you know what I'm getting at, trying to get
Yeah.
at, affecting either you are struggling or you are thriving, and you're affecting, your family, you're affecting your kids' lives, your own life is affected by that. Like you said, people around you. And I think that is one of the most detrimental things about our culture is that we, especially with social media, and like a friend of mine was telling me that she read a book about how so much anxiety and things started because of the Industrial Revolution.
Oh, totally.
And I like really want to read that book because I mean, part of what's going on in our minds has been around forever because it's like the Buddha was talking about this 6,000 years ago.
Right.
But it's like really amplified because we're on social media. We're constantly comparing ourselves. We're constantly feeling like we need to have more to be more. And that really messes with your mental health. We live in a culture, unfortunately, where like I think our mental health is getting worse in some ways. And it's also still really stigmatized to even talk about or think about. So I really appreciate you, kind of highlighting that personal development or spending any time focusing on yourself and your needs and your self-love. That is like the most healthy, beautiful thing that you can do so that you can be in an even better place to impact the world and impact people around you. And so that, life is just a better experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
For you.
you're the only one who's going to live in your head for the rest of your life.
Right.
So if you want to decorate that, make it nice, Like
Put some nice curtains up in there and like some house plants and flowers.
Yeah, and if, and if there's like some structural issues in there, then you just, go do a little carpentry in there, go buttress it up so you feel more stable. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. Your house had some, structural issues. You'll be like, well, I don't want to go try to brace that wall because that'll mean something's wrong with my house. It's like, no, if there's something wrong with your mental health, like get the support you need to hold up your roof.
And let's be real, like every human you meet has self-worth issues. Like
Totally.
seriously, that's reality. And that realization has helped me be so much less shy and so much less afraid of people, less socially anxious. Because it's like, if you can be the person, like even if you just see them at the grocery store and you like smile at them and it's like genuine, if you can be like a person who shows up genuinely in the world, it's so rare, How often are you at the mall or whatever and somebody's just like, hi, how are you? And you're like, wow, this person actually, they don't even know me and they're just being genuine. It's like those things make a huge difference. I don't even know why I got on that tangent now. I feel like I lost my train of thought, but I just was feeling really passionate about that.
You're really present too. Yeah, well, and to that example, it makes me think about one of the other things I noticed recently, which is that when you are able to just be present, be like, hey, how's it going? Not from a place of agenda, but just from being present with this other human, that connection is so real and so deep, and it can happen so quickly. And it made me realize that so much of my early years, especially kind of high school, college, I tried to be a nice person so that people would like me. So even when I was a really good listener, which I really tried to be, I tried to ask thoughtful questions, really think about what the other person was saying. There was some element of that was like, if I'm a good listener, people will like me. So trying to rework my sense of presence has also been interesting. And so beneficial too, because now I can just talk to people as people. If something amazing, if a business relationship happens up from it, if something happens, that's great, wonderful. But I'm not trying to force things. I'm not trying to like force the world to fit into this thing. And like, because that's scarcity mindset. It's like, if I don't drive every single thing in every single interaction, then I won't get enough, right? It's this whole idea of not having enough, not being enough. So I appreciate your tangent because that allowed me to go on my tangent about feeling like we are enough as the way we are.
Well, speaking of tangents, one thing that I wanted to ask you about that was a big change over the last year is that you shaved your hair off.
Yes.
We both actually made pretty drastic hair changes. And I was going to ask you, what's that been like to have a totally different look?
You also totally, yeah, took a lot of your hair off too.
A lot, yeah.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I feel like it was a metaphor of shaving off the fear.
Oh, shit. Nice.
The fear of having my hair thin over time, the fear of looking or appearing older, the fear of fully being seen for who I am. And I appreciate you asking that question because we hadn't talked about that beforehand, but I was actually just thinking about that this morning and how I feel like a different person in the best way possible. I was looking at photos of myself from college. I'd pulled up a couple of random things, and there are a couple of photos of me from college. And I was like, I almost don't recognize that person, not because it's not me, but because I am more fully myself than I've ever been. And I'm embracing that. And it's just the most empowering experience. And I have so much compassion for who I was back then because I'm like, wow, you were so scared and felt like you could never get enough love and you could never be enough for yourself or for anybody else. And just really trying to have compassion for that person who had a lot more hair, but also a lot more insecurity. So yeah, how about for you? What's been the experience of, changing the outside and reflecting that on the inside?
I really appreciate that reflection. That's so cool that you were thinking about that today and could provide that. Part of me thought that this was just going to be silly, but I'm really glad that you said that. Was awesome. Yeah, because it made me think about how I was like, what ways was I didn't shave my head, but I mean, my hair was pretty long and now it's like I keep cutting it shorter and shorter, but it's like pixie style cut. And oh man, for me, it was in some ways about my femininity and believing that I had to look a certain way or be a certain weight or something like that before I could like change my hair. And also, I mean, in full disclosure, like my ex-husband was really negative about me cutting my hair. There were a lot of slurs involved that were ridiculous. And so like, I think that a part of me had just felt afraid to do that. So yeah, like, I mean, I feel so much better, actually. I feel so much more myself. Like, I feel like it's kind of just the right amount of like edginess, like professional edginess, that I really like. And I think it's a pretty accurate representation of me. And plus functionally, it's just a lot easier to take care of.
That's true.
But yeah, it has been very interesting because I have like cut it really, really short the last time I got it cut, and just it was the shortest I'd gotten it done. And it just blows my mind because there's no way a year ago like I would have cut my hair with what in my mind was like a very masculine cut, but I just did it and was just like, hey, it feels good. It's going to grow back out, like whatever. I just did it, and I really liked it. So it is something about that being empowered because you're making like what we call, a radical act. We've talked about that before, and
yeah, that's a great endorsement as along those lines, a great endorsement of taking some symbolic step.
Yes.
And also acknowledging it's not permanent. It's just, I mean, even tattoos, I guess you can get removed these days. But some symbolic step, whether, cutting your hair, some change of clothing.
Going on, like moving somewhere and living somewhere else for a while.
Yeah, or changing the furniture in the space you're living in, or doing something different on a night you wouldn't normally do it. Like, just expanding what's possible for yourself. I think that's really what's about. And the tiny act reminds you that you are powerful and you're capable of it. So I'm a huge fan of symbolic acts. Like, oh, you cut your hair. Like, so what? People do that every day. It's like, yeah, but what does it mean to you? What does it mean possible for you? So if you're contemplating doing something wild with your life, our listeners,
we're pro that. As long as it's not self-destructive. That's right. Which this is the asterisk caveat to literally everything we believe on this show.
Yes.
It's okay. You know what, though? Sometimes you go through things where you like are just kind of being a little bit wild and you need to get it out of your system, and that's okay too, But just don't do anything too crazy. But
thank you for completing my thought. I was like, I don't know where I'm going with that as I started saying that. I was like, I'm not sure this is really where I want to end the podcast today. Just go wild, just live you, do you.
Yeah, I mean, and even like just the little things. Like I used to play video games a lot growing up, and then just for the past few years, I didn't have access to them. I wasn't really playing them. Get back to Wichita, and I went over to a friend's house that I knew they're like really into video games and stuff. And I'm like, hey, can I play some of your video games? And luckily, we teach the growth mindset because I sat down and it was like literally, I haven't played a new video game for like 10 years probably.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like super behind in terms of video game technology. And she pulls up this Mario game and it's like open world Mario. What the hell? I was like, what is this? I didn't understand. Like, I'm used to like, okay, I click on a level and then I go on the level and I go from left to right and then I win the level. Like I couldn't understand just like this open map that you just walk around and talk to people and fight people and whatever. And what was so funny is that I felt really proud of myself for like sticking with that. I was like dying constantly, but then I got to where I was doing it and it was just a little thing. But it made me feel really good because one, I didn't give up. I didn't rob myself of a new experience because I knew I was going to suck at it first, which is what the growth mindset is about, right? It allows you to have a richer experience of life because you're willing to try and do new fun things that you're going to suck at it first, and that's okay. It makes life so much richer. And that's how I felt about playing open world Mario. So it could be something really little, you know what I mean? But just anything that's something new and,
Yes.
allow yourself to have that richer experience,
That's awesome. Well, as we are wrapping up here, do you have any final thoughts you would love to close out season 2 with?
I mean, I just think that I'm speaking to the audience now, like Blake and I, we really believe in you. We don't have to even know you to believe in you because we believe in what's possible for people. And we believe that people are resilient and strong and, creative and all of those things. And so I just, sometimes we get a little bit teased because we're so super positive all the time, but that's like really how we are in real life.
Yeah.
And we really think that, and I just want to encourage you all. That's sort of me as a note of encouragement. What would you like to add?
I love that. I'll piggyback on that for my final thought, which is that I have seen people who thought they were in situations that were insurmountable, that were going to be problems their entire life. Sometimes they did something that physically changed their situation, but sometimes they just changed the story and their lives are so much better. I mean, there are people you and I have coached. There are people who we've met who have experienced this. There are people who have gone through extreme trauma and struggle. And so I refuse to be pessimistic about the capacity for people to transform their lives in meaningful ways. And I work with kids every day and I see so much potential, so much hope. And adults are just big kids. They've just been alive 30 more years or whatever. And so the same thing is true for you, to our wonderful listeners, as you said. You may feel like, hey, life has gone on too far at this point, but I say life is here today. Like, what is possible in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years? Like, how beautifully could things change? And of course, there are going to be struggles and challenges and frustrations and disappointments and mistakes and failures and all that stuff. And if there is a practice you have that helps you acknowledge that and feel that and let that be okay and keep bouncing back again and again, like you're saying, whether it's a growth mindset, whether it's I don't quit, I've got grit, like anything that it takes. But isn't that a life that's worth living? Isn't it worth trying to be in that space that you love, not because it's without problems, but because you are embracing the problems? So I'm about to get onto my motivational toolbox there.
I mean, yeah, and really like a large part of that is trusting yourself. I can't emphasize this enough.
Yeah.
It's like really trusting yourself because, just know that you're gonna have those struggles and challenges and things that set you back, but just know that like you can handle it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get into those moments where like I am falling apart and I literally cannot handle this. That is not true. Like you can handle it. And getting this kind of support that you need, getting out there and going for a walk or whatever you do, but you have that strength and resilience. I just think that having that good, healthy relationship with yourself is going to allow you to do all of those things and live such a richer life. And we want that for you. So
yeah, and I'll echo one more thing you just said. I know we're really going to wrap up 15 minutes later.
Get your fist out there.
It's just something you said. It's like when you feel overwhelmed, when you feel like everything is going wild, yeah, ask for support. Like ask your friends, ask family, ask a therapist, ask a coach, ask a religious figure if that's what you're into. Like, yeah, watch a video, like take a walk. I think feeling like we have to bear all of our burdens ourselves, to return to my original point, is self-sacrifice that is not necessary. And we think if I ask for help, I'm going to be a burden. So I just need for other people to be happy. I need to sacrifice my happiness. And to bring it full circle, I can say the more I've asked for help, the happier other people have been because they're seeing the real me. They're not seeing this caricature, everything's cool version of me. They're seeing, hey, I could really use your support. And they have a choice, to bring it back to your point, of whether they say yes or no or not right now or yes and I can do this part in this way. And if they say no, that's fine. That doesn't mean I'm bad. Doesn't mean I've made their life worse. I've given them an option. They've chosen and they've seen the real me and I've seen the real them. And that is a gift.
I think that is such a good point because, we have to remember that, well, at least for me, I find it really valuable to remember that, I don't know, they say one door closes and another door opens, but I believe that we live in a friendly universe, right? And that the universe is acting for us. So if somebody says no, like maybe it wasn't right for them or wasn't right for you, and you'll be able to find the support from the person that is going to be the most helpful to you and that it's going to feel good to them too.
Yeah, that's a good point because often we're like, oh, if this person doesn't support me, then they don't care about me and I don't have any help. It's like, no, maybe them helping you, if they're not in a great place or they're not fully resourced, would actually hurt you more than help you. Mm-hmm. So yeah. I appreciate that clarification because I think so often we can get trapped again in the non-choice world of like, if this doesn't happen, it means I have to be unhappy.
Right. And I just think too, it's such a great, flipping on its head where it's like in the same way that if we don't feel like we're in a place to support someone in that exact moment, or that, we're emotionally maxed or that we've got something going on, we don't feel like it's the most healthy thing or whatever, we're allowed to say no.
Yeah.
We're allowed to say no. We're allowed to say yes. We're allowed to make whatever choice. And we also have to recognize that other people in our lives are in choice too. And it can be so empowering to just remind your friend, like, hey, can I talk right now? Because I'm really stressed out. And they're like, I really can't talk right now. Can we, and you're like, okay, that's okay. I know that you're in choice. I know that you care about me and whatever. Not like, I hate you. You know what I mean? I don't know. I feel like we're rambling now. We need to wrap it up.
Well, we appreciate your choice of listening to us.
Continuing to listen to us.
In fact, you've made it this far.
We've put in every platitude possible.
Yes.
No, I'm teasing.
Well, yeah.
We're being really genuine. I tease a lot, but we're being really genuine right now. Like, it's not like it's not like we have this list. It's like, check.
Motivational phrases to cover in a podcast.
Dang, we haven't talked about forgiveness. We haven't talked about we haven't talked about radical acceptance yet.
That's right. Gratitude practice. Well, I do want to say on the gratitude practice note, though, we also really appreciate all of our guests.
Yes,
we've had some amazing people that we've had the opportunity to meet and talk with over the course of this season. And we're just so impressed by all the incredible impact they're doing and how they're sharing their truths and themselves in all of their successes and their challenges and their messiness and their truth. I think I said that twice. all of the truths.
Truth with a lowercase t and then truth with an uppercase t.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you for the diversity of truths. Yeah. So we were super grateful. And also just for you for being on this journey with us. It's a long journey of your own experience in life, and we appreciate the opportunity to experience that, to hear from you. We've had so many lovely people reach out to us, and we've gotten to know them, and that's one of the reasons I'm also grateful for the internet and technology. Finishing out my gratitude list. Thank you. Series of tubes. A dump truck. It's not a dump truck. That's an old joke, man. Kids these days aren't even going to know what that's in reference to.
Dump truck. What are you talking about?
There was this congressional hearing on the internet, and there was a senator who had no idea. He was like, the internet's, it's not a dump truck, it's a series of tubes. And so that became like a thing.
I think that was mostly just your obscure reference.
No, other people know about this. If you know what a series of tubes is, comment on whatever platform you're listening to this on. Be like, I know what a series of tubes. That's all you have to say. Any party thoughts?
Obviously not connected to the series of tubes enough to know this reference.
Well,
point being,
those are my parting thoughts.
All the things, all the flowers and the clouds and the tubes.
Yes.
And and each other. Oh, do you know, I want to say I'm really grateful for you because, you know, I'm just thinking about how we're both really in this really interesting place right now of really trusting ourselves, like honoring our true selves. Both of us have done that. I think that a lot of that has been in part because of us supporting each other. Like, I know that I feel like I've been that way because you've been supporting me as a friend and also as someone that I admire. And I just, I don't want to assume that you feel the same way. I was like going to be like giving gratitude to the partnership. I mean, though, you know, I feel like I can't assume that. We're close enough to where I can assume that we're grateful for each other.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm grateful for the vision that you've had to along the way to see this through. And in moments where we were still trying to figure out what exactly everything was going to look like and would it work and everything, I really appreciate your clarity and commitment to making that happen. So thank you for that as well.
Go team.
Go team.
Go team. Awesome. Well, thank you all. We'll be in touch. No, that's not the right way to say it. We love you.
Yes.
And air hug and air fist bump.
I know. That's probably a really bad marketing strategy, but we're not here with an agenda. We're just here to love you and support you and say we are grateful for you.
Yes. And if you want to reach out to us, you know, just go to motivationalmillennial.com and there's our contact information on there. You know, we're here for you.
Peace and love.
Bye. For show notes and previous episodes, or to learn more about our coaching and event offerings, visit motivationalmillennial.com. That's millennial, MILLENNIAL. Keep in touch with us at facebook.com/motivationalmillennial.
We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email with your thoughts, comments, and suggestions at podcast@motivationalmillennial.com. And tell us who you might like to hear from, or if you think you or anyone you know would be good for the show.
Our theme music was composed and performed by our very own Blake Brandis.
The Motivational Millennial podcast is edited by Brittany Felix. Have a great week, Motivational Millennials!